the disciples of the dark gods, the wielders of the ruinous powers. The question isn't if the warriors of chaos will bring untold annihilation to the Warhammer world, it's when. It's time to give the warriors of chaos the proper faction guide they deserve. This video will go over in detail each unit on the chaos roster, what they do well, what they don't do well, and how to use them efficiently and successfully on the battlefield. Because in order to wield such unholy power, you must first understand it.
I feel the warp overtaking me. It is a good pain.
Before we look at each unit under a microscope, we need the big picture first, the overarching theme of the Chaos faction and how they play as a whole in Total War. If I had only one sentence to describe the Chaos Warriors, it would be this. As a faction, the Chaos are elite, durable, and very powerful in terms of damage, but they are very expensive and virtually guaranteed to be outnumbered. They have some great options in characters, heroes, magic, infantry, cav, and monsters. Their next point is that Chaos has no net list. They have no take-all-comers build that's safe and solid against all factions. You must tailor each build to specifically counter whatever faction your opponent is bringing. Now, of course, every faction does this to some extent, but I can think of a few very solid and very common Empire, Greenskin, Bretonnia, Vampire, and even Dwarf builds that are powerful enough to take on a variety of opponents while changing very little. This is not the case with Chaos. When you play with Chaos on multiplayer, the battle truly begins far before the first engagement. It begins in the lobby when you match up and play the mental guessing game with your opponent. It's like a mind game, just the way Tzeentch likes it.
Do you hear the voices too?
A few other points, overarching points about Chaos. They have virtually no real range capabilities, bar one artillery option and some very short-range skirmish cav. They have no traditional missile units, and they'll never win in a firefight. When you play Chaos, you must close the distance quickly. However, what the Chaos Warriors lack in traditional missiles, they more than make up for in magic, which they are very good at, and some would say even reliant upon. They have access to 4 lores of magic, which is the most out of any faction save the Empire, and can even take all 4 casters as lord options instead of heroes. Their magic focuses on devastating damage output, which can help make up for their smaller numbers. Chaos do fight an uphill battle in multiplayer. They don't have the healing options of humans and elves, they don't have the numbers of orcs or beastmen, and they don't have the firepower of the dwarves. The Chaos Warriors do not win wars of attrition online. They win by striking the hardest, fastest, most devastating blow possible, crippling them to a point of no return. They're more like a wrecking ball than a hammer and anvil. But with such low numbers, timing and target priority become very critical, and the margin for error is very slim. But when done right, the Chaos Warriors can pack the hardest punch in Total War. Let's take a look at the units.
The Chaos Gods speak clearly now.
The generic Chaos Lord is versatile, durable, and very common in multiplayer. He has high armor and solid melee stats all around, but his main strength is in his versatility and unpredictability. He has access to a variety of mounts, including the Manticore and the Chaos Dragon, both of which cause terror, fly, and add armor-piercing damage. This is where you begin the mind games. Chaos can very easily go for air power, say by bringing this guy on a Manticore and 1 or 2 more flying units. Or you could not, and just stay on the ground. This seems to be more of a toss-up for Chaos than for most other factions, and can certainly confuse an opponent. He also has access to the very valuable Potion of Toughness, which grants him health regeneration. In my opinion, you should always take this. His optional piece of war gear, the Filth Mace, grants him Poison and Terror, two extremely good rules. This guy, in my book, is a winner all around. The next 4 lords are the Chaos Sorcerer Lords. Each is a powerful caster that specializes in one of the 4 lores of magic available to Chaos, those being Shadows, Death, Metal, and Fire. Honestly, they're a little bit hard to justify, seeing as the hero version of each has the same spells that do the same thing, but for half the cost. Speaking of the spells, this seems as good a time as any to talk about why Chaos depends so heavily on them. Being outnumbered but still needing to make a devastating hit means the warriors of Chaos benefit heavily from spells like the Pit of Shades, the Purple Sun, the Fate of Buna, and even Fireball to lay the death blow on an enemy unit that the army can't reach because of the low numbers. For example, use Fate of Buna on Demigryphs or Pegasus Knights, use Pit of Shades on Peasant Bretonnia, use Fireball on Morgar, and use that really good metal spell too. You know, the really good metal spell.
Yes!
Nah, transmutation, you alright. But still, if you're looking for a caster and don't want to shell out for both a lord and a hero, then one of these guys may be for you. Like the lord, they may all be mounted on steeds, manticores, or dragons. Get Siggy with it. Prince Sigvald, the Magnificent, is your first and cheapest legendary lord, clocking in at 1705 when he's equipped with his staple piece of war gear, the Auric Armor. And you should always equip him with the Auric Armor, because it's really good. It grants him constant health regeneration, a true luxury indeed for the scion of Slaanesh. He can only be taken on foot and never on a mount, but believe it or not, that's an advantage most of the time. In a meta where lord sniping is common and effective, having a durable lord on foot is a smaller target and a larger risk for opponents that are looking to dive in early. If you're playing against a faction that likes to dive in on lords, with say feathery ponies or really fat eagles, Sigvald may prove quite a good choice for you. He's also immune to psychology, which always helps. And he has the duelist trait, so he does very well in one-on-ones. His downside? He is not armor piercing, and he generally lacks the speed of mounted lords. Also, he's kind of obnoxious to listen to. Mr. Suneater. Kolek is an absolute monster. Literally, of course, but also in terms of pure stats. He's pretty much as powerful as he looks. He causes terror, has a whopping weapon strength of 520, a ton of which is armor piercing, and he's extremely fast, which often deceives opponents. He does splash damage as well, so honestly there's nothing that he isn't really good at killing. He has a built-in lightning bolt ability to top it all off. It works like a bombardment, and it's also very, very powerful. You should use it on high-value, low model count units, like demis. His downside is that he's a walking target, and will almost always be under constant fire from everything from cannons to handguns to fireballs. So keeping him alive is a lot more challenging than one would think. Kolek dies to lord sniping about twice as fast as Sigvald in multiplayer, just something to keep in mind. Overall though, Kolek is very, very good, especially for the price. He does a ton of damage, he's not very difficult to use, he's beginner friendly, and he's a ton of fun to play. Your last stock legendary lord is Archaon the Everchosen, lord of the End Times and the ultimate commander of the Chaos Warriors. He looks and sounds brutal, and he's a ton of fun to play. He's a rare mix of spellcaster and melee powerhouse. His magic options come from the lore of fire, which has some very good spells that buff the damage output of your army. He also makes every unit in your opponent's army a little bit weaker to fire, which works well combined with the Flaming Sword of Ruin spell. One of his war gear pieces, the Crown of Domination, creates a bubble of psychology immunity for your army, which is invaluable to the Chaos Warriors. His downside though? Archaon is so expensive in gold that it's almost crippling. The value CA puts on caster melee hybrids is very, very high. That said, he can sometimes work out when your army is kept close together and brings the battle into a melee blob. He works well against, say, the Treekin of the Wood Elves or sometimes the Vampire Counts, and they also just so happen to be weak to fire. All in all though, Archaon is quintessentially Chaos. He's definitely my favorite lord, and despite his high cost, he can be made to work. You just need to synergize his abilities with the rest of your army. Now guys, there is one more legendary lord on the Chaos roster that you may or may not have available to you. The Lord of Change, a Greater Demon of Tzeentch, is a powerful melee monster and spellcaster that players can obtain upon beating the campaign. However, there are plenty of videos on him already, and I'm going to stick to the stock roster so new players can benefit. The Exalted Hero is the Chaos Warrior's generic melee hero, and as far as those go, he is amongst the best. Better than the comparable units like the Empire Captain and the Bretonnian Paladin by quite a bit. Although the popularity of melee heroes has fallen in favor of casters, he can still play a pretty decent role in your army, especially if you mount him on a Manticore. In partner with a Flying Lord or a pack of Feral Manticores, this guy is for sure in the starting lineup of the Chaos Goon Squad. The Sorcerer heroes of the Chaos Warriors are cheaper versions of their respective lords. While it's true that they do have access to the same spells and those spells do the same thing, they are a much cheaper option to get the magic that you need. Like the lords though, they do all offer a unique bonus to your army just by showing up, based on their specialty. The Firecaster grants Kindle Flame, a map-wide weakness to fire damage. The Deathcaster has Life Leeching, which really just buffs his own magic ability and other casters in your army, but make no mistake, this ability is very good, especially if you have two casters in one army. The Shadowcaster slightly improves the speed of every unit in your army. It isn't by much, but it can be the difference in some close chases. The Metalcaster does something similar, only instead of speed, he marginally buffs the armor-piercing damage of your whole army, and that can certainly add up quickly. All the caster heroes are very common to see in multiplayer, and I highly recommend that you begin to get comfortable with one or two of them. Chaos do indeed need magic to win their critical engagements, and these guys are the way that you're gonna get it. The first and cheapest unit for the Chaos Warriors are the Chaos Marauders with shields, coming in at 375 gold. This may seem inexpensive, especially in an army made up of very expensive units, but they're the Chaos Fodder units. And as far as fodder units go, they are actually fairly expensive. And like most fodder units, unfortunately they're pretty much garbage. They're mainly used for filling gaps where you need bodies, or using their shields to deflect incoming missile fire as your front line advances. Other than that, they may be able to edge out things like Empire Spearmen or Skeletons, but prepare for a pretty quick waiver otherwise. Next up are the very same guys, only this time they're armed with great weapons instead of shields. This grants them armor-piercing damage, which is almost always very valuable, even if on a relatively low-tier unit. These guys definitely make an appearance more often than their cheaper kin, although at 500 gold, they really aren't considered fodder anymore. They're a great pick against the dwarves, who will almost always have good armor. But take these guys if you need some extra armor-piercing damage on the cheap in any matchup, and always support them with a unit that gives a leadership bonus. Speaking of leadership bonuses, next we have the Aspiring Champions. These guys look incredible and they're very good as well. They're like a unit of mini-heroes in that they provide a leadership bonus to nearby units. They have great stats, do magic damage, and have very good armor. The downside is, their unit size is tiny. We're talking a dozen models, give or take depending on what you're playing. It's best to use these guys sprinkled into your front lines to buff their leadership and turn the tide of close engagements. They're a strong, affordable choice in most matchups. Leadership is very important to any army with small numbers. These guys are just one of those units that always seems to pay for themselves and more. I definitely recommend them, but never use the Vanguard option. In my opinion, it's just not really what they're meant for. The next unit are the bread and butter frontline infantry corps of the Warriors of Chaos. They are of course the aptly named Chaos Warriors. Chaos Warriors are durable, well-armored units that come in 3 loadouts. The first are Chaos Warriors with shields. These guys have the best defensive stats of all 3, and therefore will hold the line for the longest amount of time. They also have the missile resistance that all units with shields get. You may consider this option when you're playing a faction that will have lots of unarmored units or lots of missiles. The second are the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Much like the Marauders before, this unit sacrifices the shield and some defense stats to gain armor-piercing damage. But unlike the Marauders, they still retain their very high armor, so their defense is not completely gone. Armor piercing is a very valuable tool, and this unit trades efficiently with units like Great Swords, Foot Squires, and even Black Orcs. Bear in mind that trade efficiency does not automatically mean winning. The last option are the Chaos Warriors with Halberds. Halberds cause the unit to gain an anti-large bonus, which means they hit harder against large units. They also have the charge defense against large rule, so if they are fully braced when getting charged, the enemy unit won't get their bonus. The mix-up of Chaos Warriors you choose, if you choose them at all, is entirely based on what you expect your opponent will bring. Know your opponent and know the trends in the meta, and the Chaos Warriors will pay off. Alternatively, we have these bad dudes, the Forsaken. This unit is honestly one of the best units in the Chaos roster, at pretty much everything, but most specifically in terms of damage output to cost ratio. Corrupted by Chaos so badly that they are now turning into demon spawn, Forsaken pack a devastating punch. They have very, very high damage output for an infantry unit, and what's even better is that these guys have speed and charge bonus stats that are literally better than some other factions' cavalry. Thus, it is not uncommon to use this unit in a similar role, like flanking. And what's even more, Forsaken do not sacrifice armor to hit hard or fast. They are actually pretty well armored. Pretty much the only things Forsaken can't swiftly annihilate are units with high armor, because their attacks are not armor piercing. Even still, when you hit as hard as these guys do, they don't even do that poorly in that matchup. At 750 gold, Forsaken are a steal and a very good addition against most matchups. How many you take, however, will depend on who you're facing. Some players will actually use Forsaken as a front line, when they know that their opponent's front line won't have great armor. Overall, Forsaken are just a fantastic unit, and I highly recommend giving them a try. The last infantry choice for the Chaos Warriors are the Chosen, a unit that stirs up a small controversy among the current player base. The Chosen are supposed to be the chosen of the Chaos Gods, the absolute pinnacle of chaos power and domination. And if you looked at their unit price, you'd think that that was true. They are very, very, very expensive infantry choices. But unfortunately, many think that their stats and impact on the field just don't justify that price. That said, they still do have very high stats, better than the normal Chaos Warriors in nearly every way. They are armored to the core, and there are scarce units in the game that can hold a line longer than them, maybe the Ironbreakers of the Dwarves. Similar to the Chaos Warriors, Chosen come in 3 options: shielded, armor-piercing great weapons, or anti-large halberds. Again, the Chosen unit you choose in will depend on what you think your enemy will bring. But you won't have to make a ton of decisions because you're likely only bringing 1 unit, if that. It's important to understand quantity versus quality in this game. Neither will always win out, and Chaos are definitely on the quality side of things almost all the time, but when one unit of great weapons costs the same as two similar units of great weapons on your roster, you need to decide which will pay off for you in the battle. Regardless of your stance on the Chosen and whether or not you think that they're worth it, you can't deny that these guys look really, really cool. The Chaos Chariot is one of the few examples of Chaos having a unit that's cheaper than similar units in other factions. While most traditional chariots cost upwards of 1,000 gold, the Chaos Chariot costs only 750. That's mostly because it doesn't do armor-piercing damage, but the rest of its stats are actually very good. Its armor, leadership, and charge bonus are on par or even above the other chariots in the game. It also has a true anti-infantry bonus, and a pretty substantial one at that. This unit is an extremely cost-effective way to rip through lightly armored infantry, such as Orc Boys, Ungors, or any low-tier troop, as long as they don't have spears. That is, of course, as long as you're willing to give it the micro it needs. Chariots in Warhammer Total War are micro-intensive, meaning you need to be actively controlling them in order for them to work. But if you do always keep it moving, the Chaos Chariot can easily pay its low cost back and more. While it's rare to see Chaos with a bargain mid-tier unit, it's not rare to see them with an absolute monster, and that's exactly what we have here. The Gorby's Chariot is not only a major upgrade from the Chaos Chariot, it's arguably the best chariot in the game altogether. It too has a huge anti-infantry bonus, but this time it's armor-piercing as well, so it can devastate the most elite and expensive enemy infantry units. It should be targeting things like Graveguard, Bestigors, Longbeards. Yeah, dwarves absolutely hate this thing. It pretty much wrecks their whole army. Like most good things in the Chaos army, it is very expensive. But if you can keep these bad dudes charging and not let them get bogged down, then they're one of those units that do the devastating, crippling, extremely high damage that I was referring to in the beginning of this video. When it comes to Cav, Chaos have a lot less choices than most, but you don't need a ton when the few you have are this good. Chaos Knights are brutal units that can either deal immense damage or even take it, depending on which you choose. There are two variants, the Sword and Shield combo or the Lances. Both are heavily armored and shielded. The regular Chaos Knights, with the sword and the shield, are one of the few examples of a real melee cav unit in the game. That means that once they charge in, they can continue to do well in sustained melee combat. That's because they have extremely high above average defense stats for a cav unit. The second option, the Chaos Knights with Lances, forego the defensive melee buffs in exchange for a massive charge bonus. They are a true shot cavalry, and like most cav, they must always be charging in order to be the most effective possible. If you can manage to do that, they will flatten almost anything that they hit. The downside with both of these units is that they aren't anti-large, so you don't want them in one-on-one cav engagements. You want them charging into infantry while your monsters and halberds deal with the enemy cav. Chaos Knights are kind of a dark horse unit, literally of course, but also because they perform a lot better on the field than their stat card often suggests. So long as you pick your targets wisely, the Chaos Knights will bring you success on the battlefield. The Marauder Horsemen are the only traditional skirmish cav available to Chaos, and pretty much their only ranged units at all, for that matter. They are very fast, lightly armored, and can vanguard ahead of your army during deployment. As far as missile cav go, they have below average range, but above average damage output. That's because instead of using bows, these guys throw javelins and axes. Depending on the variation you take, they can actually deal significant damage to an enemy unit if your opponent ignores them for too long. They come in 3 variations. The lowest tier and cheapest option are the Marauder Horsemen. They do pretty good damage, but it's not armor piercing. They are very lightly armored and can be taken out quickly if you're not careful. The next option up can actually be a game changer, the Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes. These guys sacrifice some range and ammo, but they do massive armor-piercing damage. The last option are the Marauder Horse Masters, the leaders of the Marauder tribe. As you might guess, they have better stats than the horsemen below them, most notably in that they have semi-decent armor. And while their attacks lose armor-piercing damage again, they do very, very high damage. These units give the Chaos Warriors a little bit of tactical flexibility, and they can really take your opponent off guard. Just pick your targets well and be careful with their short range. Chaos Warhounds are packs of demon dogs used to hunt down vulnerable prey. They are cheap and very fast. You'll often see them coming around the flanks looking to get an easy pick on a juicy target. Juicy targets include things like Wood Elf Glaive Guard, Peasant Bowman, and any low armor unit with low melee stats. They are also very good at chasing down enemy units that are fleeing from the battlefield to make sure that they see their way to the edge of the map. They come in two flavors, regular and extra poison. The poison version are virtually the exact same, except for the poison attacks. And they're green, which is pretty cool. Poison is an extremely valuable and tactical weapon in this game, and it's often overlooked. It severely hampers the enemy's speed and damage potential for 10 seconds. It's very common to see poison warhounds accompany a much better melee unit into battle, because the combination is brutal. However, once your doggo unit runs into anything that can put up a fight, they're gone, so don't get too attached. Trolls are large monsters that pack a massive punch. They do huge amounts of armor-piercing damage, but they're low in number. If you use them in concert with a strong defensive infantry corps that will hold for a long time, like say every infantry unit in the Chaos Army, then you have a very lethal combination. The Trolls' main weakness is their poor leadership. For being that big, they get scared really easily. You can offset this by mixing them in your front lines with characters or aspiring champions, or just by giving them some chevrons. Trolls also have a natural automatic regeneration, which means if they do run from combat, they'll come back again at better health. Traditionally, Trolls have poor armor, so the regeneration is even more critical. But once they turned to the Chaos Gods, they saw the light, or darkness, and they were soon gifted some pretty ramshackle armor. The armored variant costs just a little bit more, but the survivability can mean a ton more damage when you consider their delicate leadership. Chaos Spawn are Chaos Incarnate, the raw stuff made manifest, the result of being totally consumed by the dark powers. Like the Trolls, they are a monstrous infantry unit that packs a huge punch. And while their damage output nearly doubles that of the Trolls, they lack armor-piercing damage, so they're effective against less targets. However, you don't need to worry about these cuties running away, as they're unbreakable. So, whatever is unlucky enough to face them is facing them until the very end. They can really disrupt enemy infantry and deal a ton of damage very quickly. The Feral Manticore is one of the ways Chaos can gain a huge advantage in the air. Combined with a flying lord or hero, or in a pack of other Manticores, he can dominate and destroy most enemy flyers. He's relatively expensive for a single unit model with mediocre armor, but that's not exactly why you bring him. You bring him for his gigantic weapon strength and the terror that he causes. Terror is such a huge mechanic, and it's a tool that the Warriors of Chaos often need to use in order to win. Tactically land your Manticore in the back of some savage orcs, and you can drop a terror bomb that breaks the back of their entire army. The Chaos Giant is a carbon copy of the other giants in the game, only somehow he's even uglier. Giants are extremely powerful units, with amongst the highest weapon strength in the entire Total War game. The 530 weapon damage stat is on par with Kolek, and 400 of it being armor piercing means that nothing is safe. He causes terror as well, so if he's mixed in with your front line, he could very easily be the deciding factor in that engagement. His massive swings do splash damage, so he can hit huge chunks of infantry at once, making elite infantry his prime target. His weakness is his lack of armor, and he's vulnerable to missiles. He's also very slow, but if you can occupy the enemy missile presence with some warhounds, or demon fire blasts, or whatever you got, and the big guy does make it into combat, you can be totally sure he's going to ruin someone's day. Dragon Ogres are one of the most unique Chaos units on the roster and in the lore. I would say they are half man and half beast, but the man part would be a lie. They are massive hulking creatures made of nothing but rage and power. On the field, they act more like a small cav unit that do immense armor-piercing damage. Additionally, they have a bonus versus large, which makes up for the fact that the Chaos Knights don't. Dragon Ogres are very expensive, but they excel at swarming and killing dragons, giants, griffins, and whatever the biggest, baddest unit the enemy can throw at you is. For every bit of unending annihilation a regular Dragon Ogre can cause, a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth triples it easily. These inconceivably powerful and large monsters are the apex predator of the Warhammer world, at least in Total War 1. They are the size of a giant, but they have the speed of a dragon. Just like they look, they do huge amounts of armor-piercing damage, with the same anti-large bonus as well. But unlike the giant, they are better armored, especially against missiles, and they get a charge bonus due to their mass and their speed. Shaggoths are amongst the most useful damage-dealing monsters in the game currently, and it's very common to see them in multiplayer, sometimes in pairs, or even in packs. The Hell Cannon is the only artillery piece available to the Warriors of Chaos, so of course it's going to be pretty rad. It's a living demon engine, so instead of firing normal cannonballs, it fires giant warp flames that explode on contact. Because of this, the shots are not only armor piercing, but they do magic damage as well, which bypass physical resistance. It's unbreakable, so it never runs, and it has great range and a good arc of fire. But the real secret of the Hell Cannon comes when you toggle into manual fire mode, because you can steer the shot once it's already fired, to represent the demonic nature of the cannon seeking its victims. Some even say, in hushed whispers, that it can reload faster if you do this. The Hell Cannon is expensive, but the mayhem it causes is quintessentially chaos in every way. Alright boys, I guess that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, or at least found it informative. The Servants of the Dark Gods are indeed a staple in the Warhammer universe, and now that we're getting 2 more Total War games, you can be sure it's only going to get darker from here. For those unfamiliar with the tabletop, the whole Warhammer world does actually have a timeline and a hard end date. That's almost entirely thanks to the Ruinous Powers and the Hordes of Chaos, the ultimate bringers of annihilation. Now, go forth and spread the gifts of chaos on multiplayer, single player, or however you see fit. This is Coda, thanks for listening, and take care.
Do you hear the voices too?